The equilibrium is achieved at the price at which quantity demanded and supply are equal. The moment in the market there is a huge amount of surplus, that means supply is higher than the demand. A shortage will exist at any price below the equilibrium, which leads to the price of a good increasing down. Good morning and welcome to the session 4 in chapter 5 Market Equilibrium, second PUC Economics, where we are going to speak about a very important topics on the equilibrium and the disequilibrium of the markets. Now, just going further, let's first try to understand what is this equilibrium and why do we need about it. When I talk about equilibrium, the equilibrium is achieved at the price at which quantity demanded and supply are equal. So very important word here. We are trying to understand the consequences of demand and supply coming to a neutral point. That means the point at which they are meeting. So moment when you are able to understand and analyze this factor that the demand and supply are matching, then we are reaching an equilibrium point. This is very important. Why? Because price cannot be determined just like that. Price cannot be quoted to the customer saying that this is the final value. Where is the price achieved? Where is the target actually achieved? It is achieved by attaining that equilibrium stand. So that's why I always say that the place at which the demand and supply will match, will meet, is what we call it as the equilibrium point. Followed by, we represent it in a graph. So I'm just going to put a graph where I'm going to tell you how exactly the intersection is happening. So let's just take a graph here. Now this is your demand curve and this is your supply curve. So this is the demand curve, this is the supply curve. Now there is a point at which they are meeting. So this is the intersection point. At this juncture, we are talking about the equilibrium. So this is the point at which the equilibrium to the market is being achieved, is being spoken about. This is a very important concept in this particular chapter. Why? Because the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded, what I say as QS and QD, should match. They should match in order to reach the equilibrium position in the market. Now, moving further, whenever market experiences imbalance, now we were talking about a balancing position. Now we are going to talk about the imbalance. That's the reverse psychology altogether. When market starts experiencing imbalance, which means to say that either the price factor, that is in terms of demand more than the supply, or the supply more than the demand, automatically there is a disequilibrium that sets in the market. Moment that disequilibrium sets in the market, there is some shortage, there are some forces that is going to run behind this scenario. So let's have a look here. Creating disequilibrium prices, surpluses or shortages, market forces drive towards the equilibrium point. So what the market will tend to do is that will tend to adjust, will tend to move towards that equilibrium front. Surplus will exist when the price is above the equilibrium. Definitely yes, which encourages the seller to lower their prices to eliminate the surplus. Now, moment in the market, there is a huge amount of surplus. That means supply is higher than the demand. The quantity is available is in a huge quantity level and the demand is lesser. Now, what happens is that you might have reached already a price, a predetermined price, but you will not be able to sell it at that price because people are not ready to buy at that price. They want the price to be lowered. So what happens here for the sellers is that they will go forward, try to sell the product at a lower price or at a lower value altogether. Why is this happening in the market is that we are trying to encourage the sellers, saying that the market is already flooded with your product, so you will not be able to go further and sell it at a higher price. You need to lessen your prices. You need to come down in the range of the market so that you are able to meet your customer expectation. So somewhere down the lane, the question of equilibrium and disequilibrium will keep on hitting the market, where you have to see that the consequences of equilibrium and disequilibrium has to be matched upon. Moment market shifts itself away from the range, there will be forces that will be acting on the market in order to bring it back to an equilibrium position. So that's what we talk about, this disequilibrium and equilibrium in the market context. Followed by a shortage will exist at any price below the equilibrium, which leads to the price of a good increasing. Now, this is very, very important. Many a times what happens in our market economy is that you will see that the prices are not sticking to the ground level. They are increasing. They are shooting up than the normal level. Why is this happening? Is because a shortage, a price exists below the equilibrium. That means demand is more, supply is less. Now, this is the condition where the price of the good will be higher than the expectation. Why? Because when you start seeing that supply starts getting onto the shortage. Now, let's look at the current scenario itself. All the automakers in India, all the electronic companies are facing a shortage in terms of the semiconductor chips. Because of the shortage of semiconductor chips, what is happening is that the production is getting affected. Because the production is getting affected, the supply will get affected. One side, you are seeing that there is a demand for automotive segment coming up in India, with people demanding for more and more varieties of SUVs or integrated vehicles altogether. But still, the demand in terms of meeting the customer's requirement is getting somewhere on the shortage factor. Reason being is that we are not able to get the supply in line. So automatically the prices will start shooting up. So demand on the higher side, supply on the lower side, the prices will start increasing. Again, a system of disequilibrium will start setting up in the market. Now, what are the changes that we are talking about in terms of the equilibrium? Changes in determinants of supply and demand will definitely result to a new equilibrium price and quantity. All of us understand and accept this factor. When there is a change in the price of demand, the old price will no longer be in the equilibrium. Point taken, very much yes, that also happens. Instead, there will be a shortage or surplus and the price will subsequently get adjusted. There is a new equilibrium. So whenever there is going to be a shortage, whenever there is going to be an excess, the market will rearrange itself. The market will again go back and create a new equilibrium position so that the goods are again available to the price demanded by the customer. So this is where you see that there is an automatic adjustment mechanism that runs in the market, where we are able to cover the shortage and the excess factor altogether. Now, with this, we would also like to talk about changes in both the supply and demand, which happens simultaneously. So what happens here is that the quantity cannot be determined for certain without knowing which change with a greater amount factor. So now what happens is that when supply and demand try to counterattack each of them, they try to keep changing automatically, the impact on equilibrium price and quantity cannot be immediately determined. You cannot reach equilibrium position immediately. There would be some changes, there would be some friction that is happening there. So now what happens is that without that factor, without that equilibrium coming into position, we will not be able to reach a point and say this is what we are looking into. So until that equilibrium position comes, we cannot say the exact price and quantity. So it's very, very important. Market comes back to the equilibrium, to the neutral stand at any given point of time, and then we are able to decide the forces acting there. Now, with that, I come to the end of this session. I hope and believe that all the information shared through this session will be of a great importance and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we will be talking more about different concepts of the microeconomics. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.